I sat on a wooden bench outside Clearwater Regional Medical Center, clutching my hands so tightly that my knuckles turned pale. The spring air smelled of dogwood blossoms, and golden sunlight reflected off the hospital's glass windows, but none of it touched me. Behind those sterile walls, my husband Jacob Reynolds was in intensive care, fighting for his life against something that had blindsided us. Strangers walked past, their conversations quiet, mundane, weekend plans, recipes, spring gardening. For a split second, I envied them. I wanted to be just another woman enjoying the warmth of the afternoon, laughing about dinner plans, or browsing for plants. But that wasn't me anymore. My world had collapsed into hospital corridors, diagnostic charts, and the mechanical rhythm of medical machines. Jacob wasn't supposed to be here. He was invincible, or so I thought. The kind of man who'd work a full day crafting custom furniture, come home smelling like cedar and sweat, still take the time to cook us dinner, and ask me how my day had been. He had this easy smile that could calm any storm. When things got hard, he didn't panic. He reached for my hand and made me believe everything would be all right. He was my calm, my home. And now watching him fade was like sinking into quicksand, slow, terrifying, and impossible to escape. Just 6 months ago, we were making plans. We dreamed of family vacations we couldn't afford yet, of buying a slightly bigger house for the children we still hoped to have someday, maybe even a dog. We weren't in a rush. We thought we had time. But then Jacob came home one evening looking off, skin pale, eyes tired, brushing off the exhaustion as just a tough day at the shop. I remember thinking it was unusual but not alarming. I told myself he just needed rest, but the tiredness didn't go away. It deepened. His energy drained faster, his breath got shorter, and faint bruises began showing up in places he couldn't explain. When he struggled to catch his breath while walking up our stairs, I knew something was deeply wrong. Then came the diagnosis. The doctor's voice was calm, clinical like he'd said it 100 times before, but the words didn't sound real. Aplastic anemia, severe. His bone marrow is shutting down. I remember blinking at him, waiting for the explanation to change, for him to say something less devastating. But it didn't come. Jacob just nodded, steady as ever, and asked, "Okay, what do we do next?" I couldn't believe his composure. My heart was breaking in real time, and he was already thinking forward. But then the doctor delivered the real blow. The only viable treatment was a stem cell transplant, and without a close familial match, the chances of finding a donor were slim. We joined the national registry right away, but the reality was brutal. Matches for someone without known family could take months, even years. Jacob didn't have that long. What made it worse was the silence Jacob never broke. He never talked about his childhood much. I knew the basics. Foster care, no known parents, no siblings that he remembered. He carried that mystery like an old scar, healed over, but still sensitive if pressed. That night after the diagnosis, I held his hand and whispered, "We're going to find a way through this." He smiled and squeezed my fingers, telling me not to worry, but I could feel the tremble in his grip. I was a nurse. I'd comforted families, held their hands through the worst days of their lives, and now I was one of them. At night I would lock myself in the bathroom, press a towel over my mouth, and cry so hard I could barely breathe, because I couldn't fix it. I couldn't save him. I thought about everything we'd built. Our little cottage on the edge of Maple Glen, the rocking chair he made for me on our first anniversary, the framed note by the door that said, "You are my always." I stared at that note for hours the night his doctor told me the odds. It felt like the walls were closing in. And even worse, part of me began preparing for goodbye. I hated myself for it. But it's strange what grief does. It starts creeping in before loss arrives. Then, just when I thought the universe had taken everything, I overheard something. Something that cracked open a door I thought was permanently sealed. It happened in the hospital courtyard. I had stepped outside, desperate for air, for distance from machines and numbers and pitying eyes. 2 hospital workers were sitting nearby on their break, chatting casually over coffee. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop, I was just there. One of them said, "That guy in ICU, Reynolds, I think. He looks just like this guy from Millersfield." It's weird, like copy-paste. Millersfield, a small mountain town 2 hours east of Maple Glen. My ears rang with the sound of it. The other nurse chuckled, not taking it seriously, but something inside me snapped into focus. It could have been coincidence. People resemble each other all the time, but deep in my gut, I knew better. I stood frozen under the dogwood trees, their petals fluttering around me like falling snow, and for the first time in weeks, something I thought had died flickered back to life. Hope. I remembered nights on our porch when Jacob would wonder aloud if he had blood family out there, not in a bitter way, just with quiet sadness. "Sometimes I imagine someone walking past me on the street and I'd never know they were my brother," he once said, staring into the dark. He never searched. If they gave me up once, he told me, why would they want me now? That doubt had kept him from trying. but this wasn't about a past wound. This was about his future, his life. That night, I sat by his hospital bed, long after the machines had quieted, holding his hand in the dim light. He was asleep, his chest rising and falling with effort. I leaned close and whispered, "I'm going to find them, Jake. Whoever they are, wherever they are, I'll find them." The next morning, I walked into the nurse supervisor's office and asked for emergency leave. My boss, who knew the entire situation, didn't hesitate. "Go," she said, tears already in her eyes. "Find whatever you need." So I packed a bag, grabbed my phone, and set out with nothing more than a single photo of Jacob and the name of a town, Millersfield. The drive out of Maple Glen felt like I was leaving reality behind. As the highway narrowed into winding roads, the soft green hills of Millersfield rose into view. Spring wildflowers lined the shoulders, and the town slowly unfolded, quiet, timeless, the kind of place where life moved slower and people still waved at strangers. I parked near a small general store that looked like it hadn't changed since the night. My hands trembled as I stepped out, clutching my phone like it was a compass. Inside, the store smelled of coffee and hay, and behind the counter stood a man in his 50s with a sun-weathered face and friendly eyes. "Excuse me," I said, my voice shaky. "I'm looking for someone. I don't know his name, but people say he looks like this." I held out my phone, showing him a picture of Jacob taken last fall, his smile soft, a flannel shirt rolled at the sleeves. The clerk leaned in and blinked. "Well, I'll be," he muttered. "You're probably talking about Logan Mercer. Lives out past County Road 9, by the old granary. He does look like him." My knees nearly buckled. "Could you give me directions?" "Of course," he said, already scribbling on a receipt pad. "You just go east till you see the rusted silo. Can't miss it." I thanked him, heart pounding, and rushed back to my car. The drive down County Road 9 was rough, a cracked ribbon of asphalt winding through towering pines and wide open fields. The sky had darkened, clouds gathering like they were watching. When I finally spotted the rusted mailbox with faded letters Mercer, I slammed the brakes. The house behind it was worn and weather-beaten, with a collapsed porch swing and peeling white paint, but I barely noticed. I was staring at the windows, trying to imagine the face I might see. Was I chasing nothing but a rumor? Or was this man the miracle we needed? I stepped out and climbed the creaking steps. My heart thundered in my ears as I knocked once, then twice, louder. The door opened. The man who stood in the doorway looked like he'd stepped out of Jacob's past. He was taller than I expected, broad-shouldered, with sandy blonde hair falling over his brow, but it was his eyes that stopped me cold, icy blue, sharp and familiar. I'd stared into those eyes every day for the last 10 years, but they weren't Jacob's. He blinked at me, guarded. "Can I help you?" My hands trembled as I lifted my phone and turned the screen toward him. "This is my husband. His name is Jacob Reynolds. Someone said you look like him." He stared at the photo, and for a long time he didn't say a word. His expression flickered, surprise, then disbelief, then something deeper. He rubbed the back of his neck and looked at me again, more gently this time. "Well, I'll be damned." "Please," I said, barely holding it together. "My name is Grace. I'm his wife. He's in the hospital, very sick. He needs a bone marrow transplant. They said he has no family, but then I heard about you. I had to come." He stepped back, waving me inside. "You better come in." The house was humble, wood floors, mismatched furniture, the faint scent of motor oil and fresh coffee lingering in the air. I sat on the edge of a faded armchair, clutching my bag while the man, Logan Mercer, sat across from me, elbows resting on his knees. "I don't know what to say," he muttered, still staring at the photo, "but I think he might be my brother." The words hit me like a wave. Logan looked down, shaking his head. "Our mom, she wasn't exactly the nurturing type. I remember she had a baby boy when I was little, said she wasn't keeping him, left him at the hospital, and never looked back. I never even knew his name." He rubbed his face with both hands, his voice cracking. "But I never forgot, always wondered what happened to him." I was crying before I realized it. He spent his whole life wondering if someone out there was looking for him. He thought he was completely alone. Logan stood abruptly. "I'll do it, the transplant. If there's a chance I'm a match. I don't need to think twice. He's my brother. I want to help." He disappeared into the kitchen, grabbed his truck keys, and looked back at me. "When do we leave?" I was stunned. I had imagined begging, persuading, preparing for rejection, but Logan hadn't hesitated. It was as if, deep down, he'd been waiting for this moment too. That evening, we left Millersfield in a quiet caravan, my car in front, his pickup trailing behind through the falling rain, and for the first time in months, my chest didn't feel like it was caving in. I was still scared, yes, but now I had something else to carry too: hope. When we arrived back at Clearwater Regional, the sky was painted in shades of dusky purple, and the hospital lights glowed like stars trapped behind glass. I led Logan through the maze of sterile white halls, my heart hammering in my chest with every step. When we reached Jacob's room, he was propped up on pillows, awake but pale, a paperback book resting unread in his lap. He smiled faintly when he saw me, until his eyes drifted past my shoulder to Logan, then he froze. I watched his expression shift from confusion to disbelief. It was as if he was seeing his own reflection in a mirror that shouldn't exist. Logan stepped closer, his voice thick with emotion. "I think I'm your brother." Jacob blinked. Tears sprang to his eyes so quickly he couldn't hide them. His lips parted but no sound came. He looked like a man staring at a ghost, something he'd dreamed about but never expected to face. Then Jacob reached out with a trembling hand, and Logan took it without hesitation. "We'll talk later," Logan said gently, his grip firm. "But right now, I'm here to help save your life." I stood by the doorway, unable to move, watching two strangers united by blood and fate, their hands clasped like they'd never been apart. The tests began that night. The doctors fast-tracked everything. Knowing how little time Jacob had left, Logan never flinched, never complained. When the hematologist returned the next morning with the results, her smile was soft but steady. "He's a strong match," she said. "One of the best we've seen in months." I nearly collapsed. I turned to Logan, who was still processing the news, and whispered through my tears, "You can save him." He swallowed hard, his jaw tight with emotion. "Then let's get started." That night they finally had time to sit together. I gave them space, stepping just outside the room, but I could hear their voices, low, hesitant, then gradually warmer. "I used to dream I had a brother," Jacob said, voice cracking. "It felt stupid, like dreaming about a house you'll never live in, but you're real." Logan gave a soft chuckle. "Life's funny like that. I'm sorry no one told you." Logan's voice was gentle. "You don't need to be sorry. We found each other. That's what matters now." When I stepped back inside, Jacob looked at me with tears running down his cheeks and whispered, "I have a brother, Grace. I'm not alone." I bent down and kissed his forehead, smiling through my own tears. "You never were." The transplant was scheduled for the next morning. I didn't sleep that night. None of us really did. I sat beside Jacob in the dim hospital light, watching the rise and fall of his chest, listening to the soft beep of the monitors that had become the rhythm of our days. Logan was nearby, resting on a pull-out chair in the family lounge, arms crossed over his chest, eyes closed but never really sleeping. There was a quiet in the hospital that night that felt sacred, like the world was holding its breath for us. By sunrise, the medical team was ready. Logan joked with the nurses as they prepped him, trying to lighten the tension in the room. "Never thought I'd be donating my bone marrow to someone I met 2 days ago," he said with a crooked smile, then turned serious. "But I'm glad it's him." The hours dragged. I paced, prayed, sat, stood, paced again. When the procedure was finally over, the doctor came out with a tired but reassuring smile. "It went smoothly," she said. "Now we wait and hope Jacob's body accepts the transplant." Hope, that word again. It had become both a lifeline and a burden. I carried it carefully now, like something too delicate to grip too tightly. Jacob was moved to recovery. His face looked softer already, like the tension that had held it for so long was finally beginning to loosen. I took his hand in mine and rested my head beside him, listening to the steadier rhythm of his breathing. Logan came in later, his face pale from the donation but his eyes alert. Jacob stirred when he saw him and reached out weakly, fingers trembling. "You just gave me a second chance," he whispered. Logan sat down beside him and took his hand. "Guess that makes us even," he said, voice catching. "You gave me family." This time, I didn't bother holding back the tears. They came freely, pooling at the corners of my eyes and falling onto Jacob's blanket. For the first time in months, the weight in my chest began to lift. Not all at once, but slowly, like morning fog easing off a field. Outside, the city lights of Clearwater shimmered against the night sky. Inside, 2 brothers sat together, strangers yesterday, family today. And between them, something powerful passed silently. A future. The days that followed felt like walking into a new life, one we hadn't dared to imagine. Each morning, I'd check Jacob's face before anything else, looking for signs, a hint of color in his cheeks, a steadier tone in his voice, a firmer squeeze of my hand. His body began to respond. Slowly, yes, but undeniably. The transplant had taken hold. Logan stayed nearby the entire time. When the hospital wouldn't allow overnight guests in the room, he curled up on the uncomfortable chair outside Jacob's door, wrapped in an old fleece jacket, arms folded, eyes always open when I passed by at night. He didn't say much, but his presence spoke volumes. One evening I brought him a cup of coffee from the cafeteria. He was staring through the observation window at Jacob, his arms crossed tightly across his chest. "He's really my brother," he said softly, like he was still trying to convince himself. "I've been alone most of my life, but this feels different." Jacob's strength returned in small, beautiful ways. First it was a longer walk down the hallway. Then it was a full laugh, raspy but real. Eventually the doctors cleared him to spend a few moments outside. One crisp October afternoon, I walked beside him through the hospital garden, the leaves golden and red under our feet. He shuffled carefully, arm looped through mine, the cool air brushing against his skin. "I forgot how good sunlight feels," he whispered. Exactly 1 week later, he was discharged. We returned to our small house on the edge of Maple Glen, only this time we didn't come back alone. Logan followed behind us in his beat-up pickup, carrying a duffel bag, and the kind of quiet energy that made him feel like he belonged before he even walked through the front door. The house felt different now, fuller, warmer. like it had been waiting for this chapter. In the weeks that followed, Logan became part of our daily rhythm. He and Jacob sat together on the porch, sharing what memories they could, often laughing, sometimes quiet, filling the spaces between them with new stories. Jacob had so few memories of his early years. Logan filled in the blanks with what little he had, stories of their mother, of other siblings Jacob had never known, of long-forgotten moments that now shimmered with meaning. One evening, Logan handed Jacob a worn pocket knife with the initials RM carved into the handle. "It was our dad's," he said quietly. "It's all I've got from him. I want you to have it." Jacob took it with trembling hands, staring down at the letters. "I don't even know what to say." "You don't have to," Logan whispered. "You're my brother. That's enough." The news of what had happened, of Jacob's illness, the transplant, and the reunion, spread quietly through Millersfield and Maple Glen like a warm wind. Cards began arriving, handwritten notes from people we'd never met, prayers tucked inside envelopes, casseroles left on our porch from neighbors who had only waved to us in passing before. One card read, "Family is everything. Don't waste a second." Another simply said, "Hold on to each other. The world needs more stories like yours." It stunned me, not because people were kind, though they were, but because in the middle of our pain, complete strangers had chosen to reach into our lives and remind us of something we had nearly forgotten. That goodness still exists. That healing isn't only in the body, but in the kindness we offer each other. Jacob's recovery was slow but steady. His hair started growing back, thinner at first, soft as down. His skin brightened, and his laugh became less strained. He walked taller, rested more easily, and one day, weeks after the transplant, he opened the garage door and stared at his old tools for a long time. "Think I remember how to build a chair?" he asked me, grinning. I laughed. Only one way to find out. A week later, he pulled me outside, hands dusted with sawdust, and gestured to the porch. Sitting there was a brand new rocking chair. Strong, smooth, carved with the same love and care he'd always put into his work. "For you," he said simply. I sat down, the wood creaking beneath me, and felt the tears slip down my cheeks. But this time, they weren't from fear or grief. They were gratitude. We welcomed Logan fully into our lives. Sunday dinners became tradition, sometimes just the three of us, sometimes joined by friends, neighbors, even Logan's co-worker's little niece, who had instantly claimed Jacob as her honorary uncle. Sometimes I'd glance over the dinner table and catch Jacob and Logan sharing a look, that quiet, disbelieving grin that said, "Is this really happening? Are we really here?" Yes, they were. We were. One golden evening, as autumn neared its end, we took a drive out to Millersfield. The trees blazed with color, burnt orange, deep crimson, soft gold. Jacob and I walked hand in hand down a quiet tree-lined road, the wind curling around us, leaves spiraling like tiny dancers. Up ahead, Logan was laughing as he carried his best friend's daughter on his shoulders, her giggles echoing through the woods. Jacob squeezed my hand. "You know," he said, voice soft, "I used to think being an orphan meant I'd always be alone, that no one would ever really understand me. But I was wrong. I have you. And now I have him too." I stopped walking and looked up at him, heart full. "Family isn't always about blood," I whispered. "But sometimes, when it is, it's a kind of miracle." That night, we gathered in Logan's backyard, around a crackling bonfire. The flames flickered, casting warm light across their faces, and the air was filled with the scent of wood smoke and pine. Logan was telling a story about a childhood fishing trip he once took with their older brother, someone Jacob had never even known existed until weeks ago. Jacob leaned into me and whispered, "I feel like I'm catching up on a lifetime I never got to live." I rested my head on his shoulder, eyes stinging. "You still have a lifetime ahead." As the fire popped and the stories continued, I realized something I hadn't dared believe at the beginning of this journey. We were going to be okay. Maybe not the same as before, but maybe something even better. Stronger, wiser, more whole. Life had broken us, yes, but it had also put us back together in ways we never imagined. Jacob survived, Logan stayed, and I finally allowed myself to stop holding my breath, because this was what healing looked like. Not perfect, but peaceful. Our story had begun in despair, but it didn't end there. It ended with family, with second chances, with two brothers finding each other, and a life renewed. And as I sat there under the Tennessee stars, Jacob's hand warm in mine, I understood something I would never forget. Sometimes, life gives you exactly what you need, just when you think you've lost everything.